You're listening to the world's smartest podcast network.
Welcome back to another episode of Majoring in Everything. I am your host, Andrea Jones-Rooy. We are at episode 8 of season 2. Episode 8, we are doing 10 episodes this season, and 8 is a very auspicious number in Chinese culture, and so I figured I better go big for episode 8. I am so excited. You just heard his laugh, and if you know him, you might actually recognize him. I'm so excited. You probably know him from maybe the Skeptics Guide to the Universe podcast, maybe the Skeptics Guide to the Future book that just came out, maybe Alpha Quadrant 6, a sci-fi review podcast, or just for being an all-around awesome person. Welcome to the show, Jay Novella.
Andrea, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Normally when we're talking on a Zoom, we're planning Nexus or doing a live stream. Basically, I'm just hanging on to your project is normally the circumstances under which we hang out.
It's usually very late at night and we're trying to come up with content. That's usually what we're doing.
Right. We're like, what can we put in front of a whole bunch of people we hope watch our stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
But
that's my life. That's life. That's what we do.
I think it might be. And we were just talking about this before we started, but it's trying to get people's attention and then in the background saying, what am I doing? Am I doing this right? Why would anyone pay attention to me? I don't know. But here we are recording ourselves and putting ourselves on
more content. We're making content, talking about content.
Right. It's content all the way down. So I'm so excited that you're here. I know you through Skeptics Guide to the Universe and the Northeast Conference on Science and Skepticism Nexus to those who follow. And so we've known each other for a few years. And I knew you originally as a science communicator, skepticism advocate, but you have a very multifaceted background. And one of the things we want to do in this show is talk about people who have unconventional paths and interests in maybe seemingly disparate fields. So I did, I know you now, it's been a few years, but I did a tiny bit amount of research because I'm a planner like that. And so here's what I've got as far as the various things I have you doing or having done. Are you ready for my list?
Ahead.
Tell me how I do. Okay, so you were a poetry major in college.
How did you find out about that?
The internet is a beautiful place. I mean, it's a horrible place, but a poetry major, which I didn't know until today.
Yeah.
Awesome. You're a musician and were in a band forever and would go back to it if you had the chance. I see a guitar behind you. Maybe you still play. I don't know. You, of course, podcast, host, co-host, author, content creator, producer, video producer, a father, a bread maker, and a former, maybe still, tech entrepreneur. Who made, didn't you have pens or something? Did you have boxes of pens from your tech company?
I do have boxes of pens.
So you're a pen salesperson.
That's good. I mean, you basically,
how'd I do?
You could give the speech when I die at this point.
All right. I'll just ask your brothers to play this recording. I don't even need to be there.
Yeah, that's right. Let's put it up on the wall. Yeah. So that you nailed it. That's basically all of my major interests. I mean, I things that I would add just between friends, like that are not important. I love gaming. I love tabletop gaming, which is like my number one escape from reality.
Okay.
That recharges my emotional batteries a lot. It's a lot of fun. I do it with my best friends.
What games?
Well, we play, like the standard Dungeons and Dragons. That's basically like the starting point for most people that get into this kind of stuff. But we've done everything at this point. We've done like Western games, Star Wars, Call of Cthulhu, lots of like horror genre stuff, like the Cthulhu thing. There's a lot of like, it could be anything. It could be like, one of the games that we play, it's called Director's Cut. And the concept is you are basically playing a person that's in a horror movie. So the setting is a horror movie.
Okay.
And like, you might play the game for anywhere from like 3 to 5 hours. And it plays like a horror movie, so it's really cool. Like these are very escapist activities that I utterly adore. And I think it is an incredible part of my life just because I need it. I really need that escape.
Well, what is it about those that is so powerful and useful for you? Because I think that seems cool, but I haven't really done it. I've played Dungeons and Dragons once, and it was in the context of a show that my friend Walt Hickey put on called Dungeons and Democracy, where we were Dungeons and Dragons, but we were running for congressional office, like a very different version. So for people who aren't listening, what's the draw here? What does it give you?
Yeah, the thing that's compelling about it, first and foremost, is, you're spending a good chunk of time with friends, right? You really do need to play this with people you're comfortable with, because you've got to let yourself completely go. You can't be like dealing with social oddities. You know what I mean? You just want to sit there and be able to do and say what you want to do as that character, whatever you're playing that day. That's number one. Number two, it's immersive. It's like, our minds are really good at visualizing things. And when you have someone that's running the game that's good at it, it does take you to a different place. It's kind of like reading a book, but you get to decide on some of the things that happen and you interact with that world. Right. So if done well, and I play with people who I think are very good at these games, it's really immersive. And it's the kind of thing that like you get you away from the typical things that are bothering you. Like, it's super frustrating and complicated and time consuming and lack of sleep being a parent.
Yes.
That alone, takes so much of my energy, and it's good to detach from that. It's very healthy. I consider it part of my self-care routine. Like I need to play every few weeks. I need to play one of these games with my friends. And for me, it's very restorative. And I walk away like in such a good mood.
Wow. Do you like put your kids and lock them in a room while you do it?
Well, a lot of times they'll go with their grandmother, or
nice.
They'll get a video day. They'll get like a video screen day where they'll play video games or watch movie. It's always on the weekends, so it's like non-school days and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, you got to make do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think I'm a big, like, as a parent, I don't like my kids to be on screens a lot. My wife and I like restrict that way down. But for these days, it's perfectly okay with me.
Right. Look, they reset in their own way and you do your thing. Does your wife do it with you?
Oh, yeah.
Or is this? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Very cool. All right. And it sounds like it's escapist, it's immersive, and it sounds, I'm going to really jam this segue in here, like a mix of imagination and creativity. And also there's like strategy and discipline and rigor to it, right? Because you're eventually trying to play a game and achieve something.
Yeah, I mean, you are like in real life, when you're trying to get things done, you've got to figure out how to do it. And it is a lot of that. There's a lot of like quote unquote puzzles that are put in front of us of like situations. A lot of it is social situations. You're dealing with other players that are in the game. You're dealing with non-player characters, which are all the other people that the person running the game has to present to you. So there is all of that. And that is a huge part of the fun of the game, because you're trying to accomplish your goals as that character. So it is challenging that way, but you really get to do stuff that you just can't do in real life, which is amazing if you think about it.
Because you're just like, I'm invisible now or whatever. I'm basing off of like Stranger Things asides.
Yeah, that is like the super, like, you don't know anything about gaming and you're like, I could turn invisible, or I have a sword, like.
Yeah. Fireball.
Yeah.
You're welcome for this. If you're ever going to do a podcast on tabletop gaming, do bring me in as an expert. I'll be happy to reference the cliches anytime you like.
I want you to come up and play with us sometime. I think you'd love it.
All right. No, it sounds very fun. It sounds very scary because I am socially awkward and I'll worry about doing the wrong thing, which I think is something that we all probably worry about in regular life too. So I get what you're saying about having a trusted person.
Yeah.
With trusted people to play with. All right. Tell me about this poetry major. What's going on? I had no idea.
So what happened was, when I was going into college, like I had no idea, I really didn't have any kind of drive to do something specific. I had lots of interests. I loved a lot of different things at that point in my life when I was, in my teens. I did get accepted to go to a school of music in Boston, and I chose not to do it because I realized I had what I would consider to be a brilliant moment of inspiration when I realized that a musician's career is very difficult. Which has been confirmed a million times in my life by, like I have friends like George, and I see, it's a lot of work and you have to be completely dedicated and you got to really love it. And I think something clicked and I realized that I didn't want to do that. And then I went into school and I kind of slipped into an English major. I did want to be a writer for a little while, which again, like that requires a very serious skill set. You have to have a level of dedication, and you have to be able to focus and drive yourself consistently. And you and I were talking about content creation earlier. Like, talk about doing a huge project. Like, let's write a novel and have it go absolutely nowhere. That's a scary proposition. And I did realize that I didn't have the stamina for that as well. I'm really thinking back, like I had to be really honest with myself about what I felt like I was capable of.
Which is hard to do ever, but especially in college or like college age, right? So that's an impressive amount of self-reflection, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, from an early age,
I wasn't doing that. Let me put it that way.
the whole witnessing your own behavior thing, that came out of therapy for me. So I did start going to therapy when I was in my teens, like my late teens, probably like 17 years old.
Okay.
And that came out of therapy, and I've been using it my whole life. Like I'm constantly evaluating my behavior, my interactions with other people, and essentially like paying close attention to how I act and behave and treat people and the words I use and everything. Right. So it helped me back then, because as I was trying to decide career path and everything, I'm laughing because poetry is probably the worst career in the absolute world. Like, it's probably the thing that'll earn you the least amount of money is writing poetry.
That's amazing. If you're trying to do it based on literally probability of income times the amount of income, you might be right. I have a lot of, we're going to get a lot of poetry hate on the internet after this, but I think you're probably right.
No, I mean, just statistically, how many poets do you know? It just isn't
just raking it in.
It's not a career. I decided that I'm going to graduate with an English degree, which is very useful because I can apply that to anything. Like, the things that you learn to get an English degree are very well-rounding types of classes, and you learn a lot of different things, and learning about literature is good. It helped me become a good writer, and it helped me get a grasp for the English language, which I've used my whole life, right? So I feel like it was better than it's better than a lot of other degrees I could have gone for, and ultimately ignored, right? Most people go to college and don't do what they learned in college.
Right.
There's a lot of people walking around with degrees out there that have absolutely no use whatsoever. But then, like, in the middle of going to get my English degree, I just saw myself taking all these poetry classes that the college had. And then I started to talk to the professors who were teaching them, and kind of getting into that whole group of people. And then what I ended up doing was I ended up kind of fashioning a degree for myself at the school. The department head and the professors that I were taking these classes from realized there really wasn't a poetry degree at this school that I went to. So they let me kind of make one up.
All right.
And some classes I came into being that I don't think they would have done if I weren't like one of the people asking for them to do it.
Wow.
Which was interesting. But, I'll give you an example of a really cool class I took. So one of the classes that I took was given by a professional violinist and a writer.
Like one person doing both, or a writer and a violinist as two people?
Both of these people were teaching the class.
Okay.
And they were like, we were exploring, because, music, of course, has a lot of language associated with it, right? Because of lyrics and everything. But we were talking about like how these two art forms are very different and how they're similar. Where are the blurry lines between the two? And I just remember like having these profound, interesting conversations about creation of all things back then. Like how are things created? Where do they come from? What kinds of people tend to slip into one of these, these two different slots. Just a really interesting, provocative type of class that I got to take, and when would I ever be able to do that again in my life?
Right.
So I feel really lucky that I kind of took these offbeat classes that made me really think about myself and about the world I'm in. And it was a ton of fun. And I came up with like my own kind of style of poetry that, so creatively, I am very much inspired when I'm writing poetry. I'm solely inspired by sad and depressing states of mind.
Sure.
Which I think is very common.
Yeah.
in a lot
If
of different
someone
art
comes to
forms.
me with a happy poem, I'm not interested. I'll just say that out of the gates.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are poems that I would say are neither happy nor unhappy. Like my favorite poem in the world is Tennyson's Ulysses. Um, and it's not a happy or a sad poem. It's just it's kind of a poem. It's very soulful, and it has a lot of interesting things happening. And there's some things that are said in that poem, I think, that are good lessons for people to hear. But for me, that's where it comes from. I identified that very early, and I leaned into it. And it happened to be a very difficult and depressing part of my life. Like my late teens were difficult because I was like becoming an adult, and I was having a lot of emotional problems at the time. And I was going to therapy, and I was, like trying to get my legs underneath me. So that there was a lot of fuel there for me to write poetry from. And, lo and behold, as I grew up and kind of my baseline became happier, my poetry kind of dried up, and it's hard to catch that inspiration that I had at that time in my life, because my head was in the perfect place creatively for me to be. And I'm simply just not there anymore.
Which feels like, for your mental health, a good thing. But I know, and it kind of makes me think of when I went to therapy and I started, it took them 10 years to persuade me to try like medication. And I was like, I'm going to lose my artist's edge because I'm not going to be as miserable. Like, you're obviously very prolific in other ways, but it is interesting that the kinds of art and even the mode of art that we create does depend on what you're going through. And it sounds like poetry was that outlet for you at that time. Do you aspire to go back to it, or are you like, I'm happier to be in a better place?
I can get myself, and I do this all the time. Like I'll try to get myself kind of in that headspace. And it's not the same thing because I'm not really feeling like those feelings, but I can inspire myself by listening to music and things like that to kind of get there. But, there's also something about creativity. This is, a whole other discussion, but I'll throw it in here.
Yeah.
There is something about your creativity. And when you're young, it's in a different place. Like as you get older, like as an example, most musicians don't write the same level of music that they're writing when they're young, right? There's something about that. Like there is a reason that it tends to dry up as they get older, like because you're changing, we're constantly evolving in our lives. And I think that there are times, especially when people are young, where there's a creative element that's happening that doesn't seem to be there when you're older. So I acknowledge that. Like I definitely can't write those poems that I used to write anymore. I'd love to, and I would, and I try to, but I'm just being legit. I'm just being honest here. I can clearly see that they're not at the same caliber as what I used to be able to do. And it is what it is. I'm doing a lot of other creation now.
Right.
Which I'm happy about.
Right. For a moment, I was like, oh God, I missed my window. I didn't do anything, but there's creativity in other ways. But you're right. There's a special kind of, I don't know, like, and maybe I'm stereotyping, but like a youthful kind of like angst, and you almost don't know how to express it any other way. Like I used to write little stories and stuff. I don't really do that anymore. Now
I think that angst is a driver.
Yeah.
And I think if you can, direct that energy to creation, which a lot of artists and musicians do, then it's a wonderful thing to fuel what you're trying to do. But if you grow up and you do the thing that the things that a lot of people do, like you'll kind of move out of that and move into another frame of reference, right? Another mindset, which I think that's normal, and it is what it is,
Yeah.
And now I can, as I'm a different person in the sense than I used to be, 30 years ago, for Christ's sake. Oh my God, I can't believe it. But I am inspired by different things. What inspires me today more than anything is other people, meaning that we work together on a group project like Nexus, like, when we're all in that zone, 9:00 at night, and we're in an intense meeting trying to figure out, like, what do we want to do this year and how are we going to shape it, and going through all the decisions that we have to make to fashion a conference. Right.
Is this going to even work? Is it going to happen? And then it's cool when it does.
But it's wonderful to have other people in that headspace sharing that drive and sharing the goal.
Yeah.
And I find that has worked very well in the last 15, 20 years of my life. Like that's really where some of the best creation that I've done has happened, in that groupthink.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that, because I think there's still, whether you're an artist or, I'm also thinking, as you're talking about, musicians, writers, poets, younger people. There's the same idea around like mathematics. It's like, if you haven't published your big proof by 26, it's never going to happen, sort of thing. And there's this like, but maybe it's a younger, youthful, individual form of creation that you start to collaborate more. And I'm slowly coming around to that myself, where it's like, oh, I enjoy the work better. We do better work. It's more fun. I get out of my own way if I have a meeting that someone else set up that I have to go to, as opposed to if I'm like, I'm going to do this on my own, I almost never do anything. So there is something to creativity, collaboration.
Having that calendar invite and having, there is a pressure that makes you do it, which I like as well. And, we both are working with the same person. We both work with someone named Ian.
Yeah.
And he's been a great collaborator for me since he started working with us. It's been amazing because I have a coworker now and someone that I can talk to and bounce ideas off of. And he and I did an incredible amount of work creating our game show, right? We had you on Boomer versus Zoomer.
It's a great show. You should check it out.
It's
on YouTube.
That show took thousands of hours of creation. It's just unbelievable the number of decisions we had to make. I could never have done that on my own. I'm not being generous here. I could never have done that on my own, ever. It took other human beings to be involved in the mix to make it all, to turn it into something.
Well, it makes me think of the complexity idea that I always yammer on about emergence, which is that, combining two things, whether it's two people, two ideas, two whatever, can in some cases lead to outcomes that are both greater, that are greater than the sum of its parts, and kind of sometimes takes on its whole new thing. So it kind of sounds like what you're describing with gaming, where it's, if you just sat in a room and said, I'm going to imagine I have a sword and a dragon, that's not nearly as amazing and immersive. And you don't go to the same kind of discovery and surprising places as you do when you're there with trusted friends, bouncing ideas off each other and building worlds and living in that. I mean, the creativity of the SGU, Nexus, all these other things that you do sound a lot like that, actually.
You're totally right. And I never made that connection. There is a parallel between my fantasy life that I play with my friends and, the gaming and the escapism that I have built in there. And then the work that I do, which hinges on working with a lot of other people on a lot of different projects. So I agree. I mean, I think I'm tapping into like similar things.
Right.
And, I have to admit too, like when we're having our meetings and, like for Nexus, because that's the project that you and I have worked on the most together.
Yeah.
It is kind of restorative for me as well, because I'm enjoying it. I like that. Like, again, I enjoy that creative environment so much. It's not a drain on me. It feeds me.
Right. No, we've talked about this too. And it's, for those of you who are not a member of the Nexus board, we, when we're preparing this annual conference, we get together. It's super. It's like 9 p.m. on a Monday. And normally at 9 p.m. on a Monday, the last thing I want to do is talk to anybody. Yeah. But I eagerly show up for a Zoom meeting at that hour. And it ends up being just super fun because we're talking about a mix of topics that are interesting. It's with other people. We're building something that we're looking forward to creating. And it's actually quite fun. And I'm thinking now about that versus a lot of other Zoom meetings I've been in where you're just like, when is this going to end? And maybe we could all be so lucky as to work in such a way that the Zoom meetings we have, or whatever meetings are that kind of, because then you end up accomplishing things and you don't even realize it doesn't even necessarily feel that much like work. Though I will first and foremost say that you work much harder than the rest of us for actually making things happen. We kind of show up and we're like, maybe this would be fun. And then for a week, you and Ian like develop it. And then we come back and we say, yeah, that was fun. You did it. Good job.
Yeah. I am the producer on that project. So, I'm a producer on most of the projects that I do because that's my job. And I get that. Yeah. I mean, it's great to not be the driver too. I like doing projects where I'm not the final say in things, because you're right. Those people have to go back and do a lot of other work in between the meetings and everything.
Right.
But it's important to say though, that I'm very passionate. And I know you are too, about certain topics. So like if we're creating a conference that I firmly believe is educational, and that there's, we're building content into the conference that I feel like people would like to hear or need to hear, or it's important. That is part of my desire to communicate science and to educate people about critical thinking. So it checks a lot of boxes for me.
Right.
And I feel good about it. And I do feel like there's a benefit. And I think that helps me a lot in a lot of the things that I'm doing. Now, again, I have a game show. I have a science fiction review show. These aren't things that help people. They're strictly entertainment.
They can help people in I see what you're saying, but they certainly can help people find community and escape, and you learn things on the game show. But okay, I see what you're saying.
But you're right though. There is a lot of the things that we do, there is a budding community in all the projects that we do, which is good. But there is a difference though. I mean, I will lean into the critical thinking things, and I have for the last 18 years. It's been like my number one project is the podcast. It's a driver. It just makes me feel good. I feel like, I'm paying it forward, and I like that, and I really like this idea. I have this thing I think about from time to time because I have 2 children. There's all this stuff that I did that they're going to have access to when they're older. Like my kids will be able to listen to what I did while they were kids, and, making these podcasts and all the other content that we create. And there's something kind of fascinating to me about them experiencing that years from now.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like my legacy, like I want them to know that I did something that I really believed in, and I didn't take the job that made me the most money. I didn't, go down the path, maybe easier paths. I would argue that there's a lot of other work I could be doing that would in a lot of ways be easier. Right. And I'm doing it because I'm passionate about this thing, and it's a driver for me, and it gets me out of bed in the morning, and it makes me feel good about myself. So there's a lot of like self-care things that are built into this choice I made to do this work.
And tell me if I'm over making some assumptions here, but you show up in these conversations very, you're, as far as I can tell, yourself in them. So not only do your kids get to see that you maybe took the not so easy path and you did things that you believed in, but they also probably get to know you as someone who they probably wouldn't interact with as their father, right? Like, listening to you have a conversation with your brothers or scientists about skepticism 20 years ago is something that I would value to have of my father, if that makes sense. Definitely.
Oh my God. If I could hear my parents in some type of podcast where they're being themselves and everything. Yeah, I agree. I'm not an actor, and I don't have the ability to, I can edit myself down a little bit, but and you probably know this by now because we've been working together for years at this point. You get what you get. Like I don't put it on.
It's the Jay Novella experience.
Yeah, I'll just shut my mouth if I have something horrible pop into my head. But I say what's on my mind. It's me. So I think that is cool. My kids will be able to like, oh, look at all these things that we learned about our father.
Right.
By listening to, I don't know. I have this, maybe they won't listen to it. You never know. Who the hell knows?
Maybe it'll be nice for them just to know they could listen. But so I want to pause for a second, because for people listening or watching who don't already know Nexus and the SGU, this is probably impossible for you to do and or nauseatingly boring to be asked. But what is the Skeptics Guide to the Universe? What's the Nexus conference? What is it that you're up to when you talk about skepticism for the past 20 years?
Okay, so the Skeptics Guide to the Universe.
I'm sure you've never been asked this before. Yeah,
never. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'm making this up. So 18 years ago, when podcasting was about 2 weeks old, my brother Steve, who is a clinical neurologist, came up. Well, we were inspired by a friend of ours who told us about podcasting. We didn't know what podcasting was. I think the word had literally been coined a few months before he told us about it. But, in essence, it's a radio show. That's what we compared it to. Yeah, it's basically a radio show that you put on the internet. And he wanted us to do a political podcast with him. And Steve said, nope, we're not doing that. We're going to do a science and critical thinking podcast. And we started the podcast literally a week later. We recorded our first episode. So since then, I have been in various stages of involvement. Like I started off just as a host. Then I was kind of like the tech guy. Then I was, getting into more behind the scenes production support and everything, all the way up to today where it's my full-time job. And I'm in charge of basically everything that this company does with, of course, direction and counsel from Steve. But I do all the heavy lifting. And this podcast is a podcast about science and critical thinking. We have 5 hosts. There's a lot of dynamic conversation happening. There's a lot of camaraderie on the show. But in the end, we like to analyze recent news items, talk about, the interesting things that are coming up like that. But we also look at everything through the lens of critical thinking. And one very important thing about that podcast is it's educational. Like, we are trying to teach people how to think critically, especially today with the internet. When we started, the internet was nothing like it is today. And I will argue that the internet is effusive today with misinformation in a way that it wasn't 18 years ago. So we are needed now, I think, more than we ever were throughout this whole thing that we're doing. So that's the podcast, and that is our number one thing, and that is where we have our largest audience. And then there's a smattering of other things that are going on as well. Like, every year we do a science and critical thinking conference called Nexus. And Nexus has been running. So I think we're in our 16th year or 17th year with Nexus as well. And it was an in-person conference. Now it's a virtual conference. And I think we're going to leave it there just because it works really well to have, we could have people from anywhere on the planet come and give a talk at this conference because it's all virtual. And I do really enjoy doing that. That's a lot of heavy lifting. That conference takes a lot of work. Me and Ian are killing ourselves every year to get that done, but it's good. And I feel good when we do it. Like, remember last year when we did it, and afterwards we were all like, oh my God, it was such a good experience doing the conference. Like, we really loved it.
Yeah.
That makes it all worth it for me.
Yeah.
And then I have Alpha Quadrant 6, which is a science fiction review show. We've been doing that for years. That's a passion project. And I don't really expect anything other than that just being fun. And, there's just a lot of fun built into that whole thing. And then we have Boomer versus Zoomer, which is, something that we would like to see grow. And we're putting a lot of energy into that right now. That's a 70s styled game show. And we can run that show virtually, which means that all the contestants and everyone are put together in a virtual room that looks like a game show set. And we could also run it live in person, which we've done. Ian and I ended up building out that physical set for it and converted everything over to, an in-person experience. And we feel very strongly that this could, if anything is going to grow, it's this project, because it's a
ton
really
of fun.
good.
It's beautiful.
It's
yeah. It looks like it makes this, it's like what I imagine watching game shows in the 70s was like, because it looks cutting edge, but it also has this nostalgia feel to it. The banter is always fun. The questions are fun. A+ on BBC. Plus, it's the only time I really talk to Zoomers. Right? I normally talk to Gen Z in the context of they're my students and I have to be the stern, no fun, whatever. And then when I have these conversations, I'm like, oh, they're just people. It's great. Yeah. So I actually think it's healing some generational divides in addition to being fun, trivia questions and a good time. So
yeah, it's cool. I mean, yeah. So
that's my plan for it.
Your audience understands. On this show, we typically have a person that's representing the four main generations that are out there. So we have people that are all the way up into their 80s, if we find someone that's in that age range, and all the way down to teenagers.
Yeah.
And they're answering the same trivia questions and everything. And Andrea, would you believe it? But the youngest people actually, on average, do better than the older people. Remarkable. I thought that the older generation would have the trivia in their head. I don't know. It's just,
because there are history questions, 1960s stuff that they would probably know because they were alive. And shout out to the millennials. I think we tend to come in quite strong. So but Gen Z does surprisingly well.
Gen Z does well. I think millennials are the strongest at this point.
A+. I actually brought you on as a roundabout way to just shout out millennials because I think people mostly hate us. And every now and again we got something. We got trivia. So I am so interested in. Thank you for catching us all up. I am so interested in something you said early on about your poetry major and everything I've known in terms of your work in the past few years. And from what it sounds like the past 18, 20 years. And there's that gap that I want to get to as well when you're running tech companies, to oversimplify, is you seem to be someone who makes things happen. I mean, you said there was no poetry major. And then not only did you get a poetry major, you somehow got the school to start offering courses that they never offered before and bring in professors who'd never worked together before. I've never taken a class with two professors who were not from the same field. It's very rare. And so as you were describing that, I was like, oh, that's the Jay Novella magic, or one of the pieces of the Jay Novella magic, which is you can, people just coalesce around you and cool things start to happen. I realize that you do the vast majority of the work, but your description of the poetry Your experience with poetry really struck me as something very similar to at least what I've observed in the way that you bring together co-hosts, co-producers, and communities. And I don't say this just to sit here and flatter you. I actually think that this is something that I hadn't even really thought of as far as your talents. Like, I think of your talents as you're a great mix of creative, scientific, and technical. But there's this other piece of like bringing people together that I think is something that have you thought about this in terms of your own skill?
Never. No, I mean, literally, this is the first time I'm considering it. I mean, I guess as a producer, in the strictest sense of describing what a producer does, a producer is getting their hands in everything, and the producer has to bring people together. But you're right. Like back in college, I wasn't a producer, but I guess I was showing some early signs that was kind of built into my personality. But I'll tell you the thing I do consciously is I'm highly contemplative and critical about the idea of bringing people together. I mean, it is something that, we've already talked about. I'm fully aware that it's part of the way that I work. It's part of what I consider to be the magic that makes things happen. The podcast was the biggest and probably the first real collaborative thing I ever did 18 years ago when we started. We were all so excited about it and throwing all of our ideas out and everything. So, I've been doing this for a long time now. I've been a part of a collaboration project for a very long time. So I think it was very natural. But also, my upbringing has a huge factor in all of this, because my family, I came from what I would consider to be a collaborative family. Like there was a lot of talking, especially around the dinner table, like, these conversations, these deep, intense and personal conversations, like started when I was a child, at home with my family. And I think that's part of it too, because I'm very comfortable with that. I'm very comfortable being personable with people. I remember the first time we met at Nexus, and I remember, and I told you this before, but I remember seeing you and hearing you talk and going, I really like her. Like, I want to work with her. And I just, approached you and started talking, and like, I cataloged you. I had you in my head as someone. That's why you came up again, because I remember saying, remember that girl, Andrea, that gave the talk at Nexus? Let's get her involved. That's because I'm paying attention to that type of thing, and I'm plucking people out of my reality that I feel kind of check certain boxes that could fit into this formula that I have. Brian Wecht is another perfect example.
Right.
And Brian, I mean, my God, is he awesome to work with, right?
Yeah.
Everything about Brian is fantastic. So I will give myself credit for that, because I do build the Super Friends team. I try to build these teams of people that have certain things that make them work well together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get that. And I appreciate that. I'm happy that I'm doing it because it's successful and it's fun. Like I said, it's that collaboration, man. Nothing beats it. It's a wonderful environment to work in.
Well, I'm flattered to have been noticed in any positive way by your discerning eye. But I think you're right that and maybe anyone who's worked in a team and they've either really liked the people they worked with or really didn't, it almost doesn't matter what you're doing. If you hate the people you're working with, that sucks. And if you don't really love what you're doing, but you enjoy the people, I mean, we've all gotten through pretty wretched jobs because we enjoyed the people that we work with. So there is that piece, but having a good eye for that, I don't know that I necessarily, I mean, I think I still work with the model of like, I'll do it alone. And then I'm really realizing this in real time. Like, it's so much more fun and less scary, I think, when I'm doing it with somebody else. Yeah. Whereas, we were talking about content creation. It's like, I'm going to make a video by myself in my kitchen, and then I'm going to look at it and be like, is this anything? I don't know. And then I'm going to post it, and then I'm going to be scared if people watch it, and I'm going to be scared if people don't. And that's no fun. Whereas if you're working on a project with someone, it's like this is the slogan, right? It's the process of making it that's just as fun as doing it. It's nice to have something at the end to show for it, but I got to work with other people. This is my takeaway. Well,
yes, I think you should, right? Because you are a fantastic person to collaborate with. I'll give you an example in the real world.
All right.
Where this shines, I think. So, like, we take people like George Lucas as a writer and a director and a producer. And, he did in my opinion, this is all solely my opinion, but I think he did his best work on this fantastic brand that he came up with when he had co-conspirators, when he was working, with Kurtzman, and he had a lot of, especially with the very first Star Wars movie, that wasn't just him. And it was such a wonderful and intense collaboration that produced this reality altering story and this brand and that film. And then, you compare the first few Star Wars movies to movies 1, 2, and 3, which were solely done by Lucas. It came out of his head. He wrote it. There was no other eyeballs. There was no other editing. It was just him. And you can feel it. You can feel the difference when you watch those 6 films. You could tell, yep, it just didn't work as well as the other ones.
Interesting.
This happens to, famous writers. This is what happens to a lot of famous writers. In the beginning, they find an editor, and that editor ends up helping them tremendously, helping them, fashion their style and make their work a lot better. A good editor. And I've worked with book editors on 2 occasions, and I know the power of what they can do, and they bring their know-how to it. But then you get like Anne Rice had this problem. She wrote the vampire novels. I don't know if you have read any of her novels, like The Vampire Lestat and Interview with a Vampire.
I know of that. I haven't read them. Maybe I should. The
early books are fantastic. So as she got later in her career, her fame and power grew so much where she stopped using an editor. Ooh. And her books went from wonderful to I can't read it.
Wow.
Because she would wallow, and she would describe wallpaper for like 5 pages. I'm not exaggerating, really? An editor will get rid of that. So,
right.
In the artistic mind and in the idea of creation, it's wonderful to work with other people because the ideas come quick. And if you're serving, I feel like I'm serving as a net. All of these ideas are happening, and I'm kind of going, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Yep. I'm going to keep that. It doesn't matter who came up with it. Doesn't matter who was inspired by who. All that matters in the end is the ideas that we come up with. And they're usually so much better than the lone person plugging away. Right. And isn't it I do find this super interesting. When we look back on any project that we work on, and we say, well, who came up with this? Who came up with that? Usually the answer is, I don't remember. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because there is some type of merger happening of the minds. Yeah. I love it.
Well, this is a very boring aside, but I'm gonna do it anyway, which is I work with companies a lot on performance evaluations, and they always try to say, how do we measure the performance of our teams? And what they do is they go around and they say, well, what was this person's contribution? What was that person's contribution? And everyone gets an individual score. And I don't have a good solution for this, but my main hang up with all of it is that you're skipping the credit assignment problem, which is what you just described, which is that if your team is working really, really well and you're doing awesome stuff and your process is working for you, then you should not be able to tell who did what. And they shouldn't be able to, if someone is coming out and saying, actually, that was my idea, or I was the one who, then you have a dysfunctional team and you're kind of going against, none of us after these meetings are like, actually, I thought George was the one who said that. It just doesn't come up that way. And I feel like that's something that's so built into our culture where we just say, well, what was each individual contribution? And the whole point is that if you bring people together, you get something, again, greater than the sum of its parts. I'm thinking of improv a lot too, right? Anyone who's listening who's done improv knows that from the yes and the world building and all of that is that you build on the ideas of others and you get further. I don't know why I'm thinking this is so revolutionary to me.
But anybody that won the Nobel Prize, right? In any field, very, very, very rarely is that person like the sole origin of they usually have teams of researchers, and let's not even talk about the fact that they're stepping into a field that's probably had 50, 100 years of other science happening in it that they're using as well to get there. But the point being, I think a good manager, I think the answer to that question that you bring up, that problem, is that a good manager should be able to discern who is a good team player and who's adding to the team. Right. Because even if you're not the person that came up with the final idea, if you are an idea generator, though, you're a person that helps evolve ideas, they're just as important as the final idea because it's the ladder to get there.
Right.
So I think what they need to do is they need to rate people on not the individual effort, but their individual effort as a part of the team. Are they mixing well right?
Right.
That's the only real way I could see to kind of get around that problem, because you're right. You can't just look at people as individuals, because especially in a team environment, the whole point is that you want the collaboration to be the most important thing.
Right.
That's the result. That's where the result comes from.
And there's no amount of, I think, systems and technology, air quotes, solutions or project workflows that are going to solve a problem of we don't work well together. Or, it's like if we sat around and said, well, should we be on Slack? Should we be on Discord? That's what I think the people are trying to do to solve the collaboration problem, as opposed to saying like, what's the right mix of people? I mean, people are thinking about this. An example I use a lot. So we mentioned Brian Wecht earlier. He was a guest on this show in season 1. And so check out my conversation with him. And a friend of mine, Kyle Marion. I don't know if you know Kyle, but she was a guest. She's a science communicator and she does science stand-up. She came on the show as well. She's awesome. But when I think of this whole, group collaboration and what's my contribution to the group, one story I remember with her is she and I were doing a show in Detroit. I used to live in Michigan, so I knew a handful of people who had come to the show. And we did the show. She had to go like park her car or something. I'm sitting at this bar in Detroit with a handful of friends, and I knew each of them like unilaterally. Like one was from Shanghai, one was from comedy, one was from this, but they didn't know each other. So I'm like trying to get the conversation going, and it's just like, it's not working. It's like, it's small talky, and then someone checks out and they're on their phone. And I was just like, this night is going to be so stressful. Like when people don't know each other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a very stressful situation. Kyle shows up an hour in or something. And to this day, I don't know what she did, but within minutes, the group was laughing, we're sharing stories, and we ended up having an awesome night, and we're all still friends. I mean, not like really close friends, but everyone followed each other and we're all in touch. And I don't know what Kyle did, but her presence made the exact same otherwise stifled ingredients of people be just like open and sharing. And she didn't, if you look back and you're like, well, how would I tell what Kyle did? Like, it's not like she was dominating the conversation. She didn't say something like extraordinarily amazing or funny up top. She just became the sinew between everybody else. And I don't know what that is, but I don't have it.
It's ineffable. Like you can't like define that, right? Because we're talking about if what you say is true and she really was this catalyst. Yeah. It's everything from people's perception of her, you're right, like the vibe that she's putting out, it's her body language. It could be just tiny little things that she does in conversation that kind of draw people's attention, right?
Right. Like, is she asking more questions? I'm sure you can't even, it's probably tiny stuff. I think you're right.
Yeah. So I think that it's a cool thing to look at, wouldn't it be great if you had that on videotape where you could really like kind of try to quantify it in a way? But I in the end, I will continue to work this way. And that is my very conscious, deliberate way of working that has, served me incredibly well for my whole life, actually.
So did you do this model? I want to ask about between poetry and SGU, you were doing tech type stuff, right? Or were you doing music or both or? Yeah.
So I was in a band. I started a band when I was like 16-ish. And that lasted, I believe it was 21 years. So that was always in the background in my earlier part of my life. Then I got into software development. I got into coding. And then a friend of mine and I started a software company before the internet bubble. Some people might not even know what that is at this point, but there was a time when the internet was growing so much that there was all of these budding businesses that were getting tons of investment money. And everybody was either a programmer or a guy or girl who was running a company. And we did custom software, and we did, we essentially worked as recruiters to find people work. And it was going great right before everything crashed. So I don't think that this was percolating at that point in my life. There was collaboration inside of our software writing, but nowhere near to the degree that what's happening today. I've been out of software so long, I'm not even sure how much of a collaboration model would work with software, because you really do need people to do what they're doing. I would imagine that you have a large team, you can collaborate, figure out all the pieces, and then it gets doled out to different people. But I'm sure it works on some level there, but I just haven't done it myself, so I don't know.
Right. I mean, this is so striking to me. So the show is called Majoring in Everything, and I really feel that people like you are like this. I think there are more of us out there. I'm going to flatter myself for a second. More of us out there in the world than most of us realize. But you know, you're in poetry, you're in music, you're coding, you're producing, you're running all kinds of tech. You're doing the technical and the creative all the time. Are you? How do you describe yourself? Like jack of all trades, polymath, Renaissance man? Like what's the...
Well, okay, so I'm 54 years old. I'm one of those people that, you know, had different careers throughout my life, you know, so I've tried different things. And I think it's kind of hard to get to this age and not have picked up a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been lucky with this job working for the SGU, in that, you know, I've really got to stretch my legs and work on all these different kinds of projects. And there's been the money backing them that helps, of course, and the will, like a lot of intent, you know, we want to try new things. But I think that I'm a very curious and interested person. Like I could very well get into skydiving or snorkeling or whatever, you know, like I would love to try a lot of different things that I'll never have the time to do. So that helps. So I just have this curiosity and a love of living my life and doing stuff. You know, I also snowboard, and there's all these other like hobbies that I have, like bread making came up last year. I love it. It's like my number one hobby now. And it's like completely captured me. It's such a wonderful hobby.
And you take it, I mean, you're in it. It's not like, oh, we all made a little bit of bread during the pandemic. You've made a science out of it. I've seen videos of you making it. You've bought that Bible about bread making. I mean, this isn't like, oh, I dabble. You're in it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happens. Once I tip in, once I get the hook, then I definitely do go all in. So that is a personality trait that I have, which is, it's good. It's a good thing. You know, sometimes it's a time waster, to be honest with you, because I can follow things that don't really go anywhere, don't bring me any happiness. But, you know, for the most part, like when something gets to a certain level, like I'm like, I got to digest this. I've got to crawl inside of this thing. So that is something that I do that I think at this point has served me very well. And it's fun. I mean, you know, when you take on something new, first off, I'm going to quote science fiction here. You know, the sleeper must awaken, right? This was in Dune. Paul Muad'Dib, the lead role in the Dune series, you know, had to evolve into something else. And I think, you know, we all have things that are in there that are sleeping, like interests that we don't even know that we have, and, you know, people that we could become that we're not fully there yet. You know, I think that we have to explore ourselves, and I think that we should follow passions that we have, because that following passions is healthy. It's good for you mentally. You know, a lot of times it's good for you physically, because you might be sports and things like that. I couldn't imagine doing the same thing over and over and over again. You know, I've been on treadmills in my life before, and they are slices of hell to me. So I have that, like, I need to switch gears. I need to do different things. And again, like, I could go back to any of the hobbies that I have in my past and still appreciate them and still have them be important to me, even though I might not do it anymore. Like poetry, like I still read my poetry and still love that I did it. And it's still important to me. I just, you know, I'm not the person that was that anymore, but that doesn't matter.
Well, let me ask you this. I always like to know, you know, it sounds like there's a lot of amazing things about doing, you know, having multiple interests, changing those interests over time. What are some of the hard parts, or what makes life difficult as someone who can tip into new things, or do you feel like a remiss? Are you tempted to like beat yourself up for not doing poetry anymore? Like what's hard about this for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of them is like, so a good example would be like, I miss being in a band. I don't have the ability to do it anymore because of the time commitment. I'm too busy. You know, I barely can watch TV. I don't even watch TV shows, you know, like I just don't have the time. You know, with the parenting and the SGU basically consume 99% of my time. So yeah,
and I just consumed the last 1%. So thank you for doing this podcast.
No, this is actually good for me, because it's a diverter.
Okay.
I do miss the people that I've worked with in the past. I form bonds with people. They just happen. I'm not even trying. It just happens. I let it hang out so much that end up developing friendships where I'm not even like trying. It just happens. So I have so many people from my past who are like brothers and sisters to me that I don't have in my life anymore. And that's hard. I really do. Like when friends move away and stuff like that, it's very difficult for me to accept. Because I know, a friend of mine moved to Florida, and when I found out they were moving, just like a project ending, like that's it. Yeah. It's just never going to be the same again. I'll never have that time again. Never be able to call them up and hang out and do whatever we want to do. Like it's more of I had it, and I don't have it. I had it.
Right.
So that's hard for me emotionally. It's one of the things I struggle with, and is a source of depression for me. Is that I don't like when things end. And as a producer, you could see where that could be hard.
Because literally producing something means it ends. Like,
yes,
it has to be produced. I feel the exact same way. I was literally saying to my boyfriend the other day, I was like, I really struggle with endings, even if I know it's for the best. And maybe, there's no silver lining for your friend moving to Florida. But yeah, if a project didn't end, you'd never do anything else.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I think it's more about the people and like not having access to people. Like when we finish Nexus, I'm very happy. But I'm not losing those people though. Like they're still in my orbit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are things that I often think about, or the people that I've lost touch with, and those versions of me that came and went that can never come again. But I'm still here. Being alive is fantastic. And, I know that there's hobbies out there that I haven't discovered yet, or haven't had the time to go to yet, that I'm going to do. So I try to keep myself engaged that way by allowing myself to continue to discover and get into new things.
Right. Open. What is it? Close a window, open a door, whatever that expression is. I don't know.
Yeah. Just don't jump out the window. That's all.
Right. Unless you're on the first floor, in which case
you're fine. Then you can pretend like you're hanging out.
Yeah. Then you film it and you go viral, and then your career is made. It's done. All right. My last question for you, Jay, is what advice do you have for people who are listening and say, gosh, I want to create things. I want to build things. Maybe I have lots of different interests. How do I balance maybe a feeling that I need to pressure to pursue a traditional path? Of course, worries about things like money and resources, with being able to explore your interests and live an authentic life and all that good stuff. What do you say to all the people listening who probably want to live a life like yours, but don't know what to do?
All right. First off, it's a hard question to answer because
you have 60 seconds. Go. Yeah.
There are people out there that would just be like, follow your dreams. And it's like, you can't just follow your dreams.
Right.
You always have to have rationality be the backbone to your decision-making. Right. So I understand that people need to make money in order to live, just to live. And you always have to keep that in focus. Right. So like, would I tell someone don't start a business? Well, let's say that it seems like viable and it's a good idea and everything. Would I tell someone not to do that? No. But I would also say, but you still got to maintain all the other things, like, diving headfirst in and not thinking about what the outcomes could be is deadly. You don't, but at the same time, if you don't take risks, then, you're not going to achieve different things. So you've got to have the rational, critical thinking backbone to be there as the adult in the room inside your head, right? You got to have the adult in the room, always monitoring what's going on and get real. It's like the same thing. Like I'm already preparing myself to teach my kids about how to pick a good partner, right? When you're young, it's all on feeling, and there is no thought involved at all. It's all on, oh my God, look at that person. I just want to, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anything. Nothing else matters. That feeling has to be followed. But that's
consumes
life.
you, and that's it. Yeah.
But would you get rid of some of those early relationships you had? Not in a heartbeat, because they were amazing. Following the passion was amazing. So the only way to titrate all of it is to try to have a rational voice in the room inside your head that's helping guide you through these things. Take risks. Go out there and start a podcast if you want to. But then I have a half hour of things I'd need to tell you in order to help you start that podcast. That's the rational part.
Right.
Don't just do it. You got to go out there and commit yourself then and give it the time it needs to gestate and to become its thing before you realize, hey, you know what? This isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I have had a lot of those, hey, this isn't working. But did we lose our apartments over it? No. Or our houses? No. So have the balance, be smart, don't rush into anything, watch out for scams in everything that you do, because they're everywhere. It's having that voice in the back of your head that's watching everything, like the eye of Sauron. Just, you got to always be on the watch out for yourself and make sure you're making good decisions. It's a really hard question to answer, though.
Yeah, I know. It's an impossible question. That's a good answer, though. I think you've given a very good and useful answer. Tell me if this feels fair. As you're describing it, it's like you want to have the parent in your head, who's sort of scanning and being rational, but then you also want to make sure you're not stifling the child who's curious and exploratory and more open to risks. And we started the conversation talking about how when you're, younger and you're writing angsty poetry, it's like you have to have some of that energy still to do new things and to be the first, launch a podcast if podcasting hasn't been around for more than 2 weeks, and to just say, yeah, let's do it. But you also have to have the parent in the room who's like, right, but how am I going to make sure that people are listening? Is this going to be something that's going to make money eventually? And to just have both. I think maybe that too many of us lean too far into one or the other. Or I've certainly gone through modes where I ignore one at the expense of the other, but it's both.
Yeah, as hokey as it sounds, like the idea of balance, it's important because you do need to do both. If you want to be a creator and you want to be a creative and you want to explore those things, if you don't take the risk, if you don't commit yourself to a project and do it, nothing is ever going to happen, of course. But again, I've seen people, like a lot of people, try to start podcasts, just this one topic, this one art form, podcasting. I've seen a ton of people try, and 99.9% of them dramatically fail. And they failed even before their project failed, because they would quit after doing it for 2 months. Right. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that.
Been there.
Yeah. But you really can't do that, because it's very unlikely that anything you do is going to be a smash hit that all of a sudden gets all sorts of attention. Like things need to gestate and grow. Just like relationships, projects are the same thing. Like you need to develop it. You need to stick with it. You need to give reality time to catch up with your vision, meaning other people. It's going to take time for other people to get in front of your podcast, if that's the thing that you're doing. Again, I see people fail because they're just not even managing that time correctly. They just think that it's going to be great, and they put all this energy into it and spend all this money. And then a couple of months later, they're on to something else. Like, what happened to the passion that you had for this thing then? Right. So pick your passions well. I think that's a good, outlook to have. Like, don't follow every one of them, but follow the ones that you think are going to have legs that can sustain you if it doesn't do anything other than what it is,
Right.
There was an incredible amount of time with the SGU podcast where it wasn't doing much. And man, we put out a podcast every week. Through deaths, through, lack of internet, like no matter what, by hook or crook, we put that podcast out, and we haven't missed an episode in 17 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but that level of commitment is what it takes in order to become good at anything, right? The whole 10,000 hour thing, which is bullshit, but you do need to put a ton of time to get good at something. You have to be willing to do that. You have to be willing to put that time in. That's why, now it's easy for me to do it, because I know the formula. I know like what I need to feel on the inside. When bread making happened in my head, I'm like, yes, I have this burning desire to get into this for some reason. And I felt,
it's real.
Yeah, it was almost tangible. I knew it. And it's something that had been percolating in the back of my head. And then as soon as I took a couple of steps and I got a little bit into it, I felt like I was coming home. I'm like, oh yeah, like I dig all this. I really enjoy it, and I knew it was going to be a big deal for me. And here I am a year later, like I literally last night was looking up, taking bread making classes up in Vermont. You know what I mean? Like I'm going amazing. All in. I'm so psyched. I can't wait to have the time to go do that,
Yeah.
So, I would say that passion is a great indicator of the legs that your interest will have. If you really feel attracted to a project or whatever, those are the ones you should be going for. Like when I'm kind of on the fence about a project that someone's pitching, I know in my head, like, I'm never going to do this. You know what I mean? Like, I don't
That's a good guideline. Yeah.
I'm not wishy-washy. Like, all right, I'll try. No, like if I'm not going to tip into all in, I don't even go there at this point. It's because it's an epic waste of time.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of all kinds of projects, some that I'm pitching to others or myself, and things other people ask me to do where you're like, maybe could be good. I'll give it a try. You're right. That's where we get lost. It's one of the places we get lost.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a little bit of exploring in the beginning, but if you don't feel that click in your head,
yeah,
then what do you think you're going to feel 2 months from now?
Yeah,
you know,
it's only going to get less fun.
Yeah, right. Because that's what happens. It turns in this passion turns into work. It's always elbow grease.
Good.
It always ends up being elbow grease. But when you're in a project or doing something that you do appreciate, the elbow grease isn't that painful because you're in the right place, right? That you're doing the right thing with your time.
Right.
So again, like, I fail all the time. I come up with ideas all the time and they fail, and we try to do it, you know, and I can sit here and list to you my failures. But the point is, you know, that there has to be that rational being in the background that's helping make some decisions there I use to guide me.
Right.
And passion and feeling the desire is one of the things that my rational mind is looking for. It's just another checkbox that has to be
a piece
ticked.
of information.
Yeah, it's a piece of information.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think before we started recording, we'll wrap this up. Before we started recording, you talked about kindling versus logs on a fire. In this case, we were talking about social media posts, like short little fun things that burn and people engage with, or like bigger pieces of content that you put out. But I'm kind of thinking as well, it's like you need the passion. Something has to start the fire. It has to be like a big moment that starts the fire, but then someone has to sit there and tend the damn thing and put logs on. I don't know how to keep a fire going, but my mother and her father were both amazing. I think my brother's inheriting it, where they can like sit and they know exactly when to add a log and they kind of poke it the way that they should. And the rest of us all just get to enjoy it. But there's a lot of work that goes in maintaining the fire. Yeah. That's very different from what you needed to start it. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, like, social media is a really good like idea behind that, right? Like, you're putting up content, and you know, you want to do a few things at the same time, right? You're putting up content, of course, that you want to interest the audience you're going for. But inside of that, there's different levels of content, different kinds of content that you need to put up with each other, right? So you need the heavy hitting, like, this is a big juicy piece of content. Like, as an example, in my world, I produced a YouTube video where I interviewed artists at Wetaworks, which is it's a company that makes props and things for movies, right? That project took 3 years. It happened. I filmed it before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened and everything kind of screeched to a halt for a little while or whatever. But that project took me years to do. It ended up being about 40 minutes long. And that to me is like a huge, huge log, right? That was like just a huge, giant body of work that I did. You know, first off, I can't put those out every day. Those take years to do. So that's one type of content. Another type of content is like the stuff that people digest quickly, that are fun, that are eye-catchy, that are easy. And then there's the things that fall in between, and you need to be doing all of that stuff at the same time. So they're all kind of dropping as they come, right? That's a strategy to posting on social media. But that kind of works in real life too. That, in your life, like, you're gonna have things that are quick and easy, and you're gonna have things that take time. And I think you should always be working on different kinds of things like that. Like, I go to my bread making at the right times in my life. Every week I do it, but I do it at the right time when I'm feeling like the need, like, oh God, I need to be alone for a little while. That's a key indicator for me that I'm going to go do that hobby, So yeah. So again, there's the rational driver in the back that's looking at things and making the observations and reacting to the stimuli that'll help me make good conscious decisions about how I spend my time. I love it. I gotta let you go, but that's amazing. You're brilliant. I want some bread, and I can make that happen. All right, great. I will get myself to Connecticut. But really having both, the spark and the rationality in your mind at the same time is somehow something I have never once thought of in my entire life. I'm going to say this only because I want to make my own commitment mechanism. If you're willing to talk about it in a future episode, there's a whole other part of conversations that you and I have had around ADHD and our brains and how they work. And I increasingly suspect that might be related to the ability to have multiple interests and also kind of go hyper focus into different ones. So if you're ever interested in coming back and talking about that particular,
yeah, for sure. You know, right. I'm very much think it's important for people to openly talk about mental issues, because it's in the United States in particular, which is the only country I really have my head wrapped around. It's a stigma here. Like people don't want to talk about it. You know, it's the kind of thing that embarrasses people. ADHD, you know, I have it. It's, you know, it's in my family. It's something that I have to deal with. I don't think we should shy away from these conversations. So I'm fully in. And I want people that are out there that have it to realize that they have it and to get the help that they need. Even if it's just becoming aware of it, it's important. So yes, invite me on that, because I will definitely tell you everything I've learned about ADHD since I realized I have it.
Oh my gosh, let's do it. Because even as I said that, I was like, maybe Jay's not public about ADHD, but so I was like, we'll just cut this out if he isn't. But okay, done. All right, listeners, stay tuned for that whenever I can steal Jay from bread making another time.
And Andrew, your listeners should know.
All right.
That you are a wonderful person to work with, and you are multifaceted as well, my friend. You bring a lot to the table. You are, you're multi-talented. You're a scientist. You are a comic. You're a performer. You are a very creative person, and I feel like when I'm having a conversation with you, like the times that we've performed together, you've been on the show or whatever, like you are fascinating to listen to. So don't forget that you have wonderful things that I think make your quiver full of arrows as well.
Well, thank you. And listeners, I only paid him a tiny bit
to say all those nice
things. Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah. It's like, how do you think they're making money over the SGU? All right. Thank you for saying that. I'm going to replay that for myself. Maybe I'll set it to be my alarm clock in the morning. Like, gosh darn it, people like me. I'm like, All right, Jay, thank you so much for hanging out. Where can everyone find you? I'll post links to all the things, of course, but where can they go follow all the awesome stuff that you're up to? Yeah,
you just go to theskepticsguide.org. That's the podcast, and everything else that we do kind of branches off from there. But, alphaquadrant6.com and boomervzoomer.com. Those are all my projects. Yeah, but the podcast, the SGU podcast is the number one thing.
Awesome. Well, it's a ton of fun, all the things that you do, and I encourage everyone to go find them. And we'll have you back to talk ADHD. Thank you for hanging out with us.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon.
And that's our show. Thank you so much for joining us for season 2 of Majoring in Everything. We're very excited to bring you all the amazing guests we've got for you this season. Don't forget to keep majoring in everything yourself. And Eric, did I do it? Is this a good second outro? See you next time.